if we want to be free in the future and have freedoms and liberties, we need privacy. It's like the most foundational bedrock thing. It is clearly mentioned in like the key documents that we would refer to, whether it be the Bill of Rights or the ICCPR, etc. So it's just so essential and so fundamental. And I think financial privacy particularly is going to be really important because your spend says more about you than your words, right? So if I want to spy on you, I'm going to want to look at your bank statement and what you're transacting just as much as, if not more than, what you're saying on social media. It really, really betrays what you actually do in your day-to-day life. So we want to make it as hard as possible for authorities and corporations to match our transactions with like our digital footprint, right? So this whole idea and concept I find really troubling of like, let's have a decentralized identity. To me, like that's the wrong approach. We don't want an identity. Like you want, like in the near future, you're not going to want an identity that is you in a digital form. You're going to want dozens, if not hundreds, of different little identities that are disconnected from each other that you use for different purposes. Perhaps use one for buying coffee, one for taking out books, one for podcasts. Like you want to make it as hard as possible for someone to like identify you. So identity is something that the state confers upon you, and I think that we need to try and fight this just creeping beast that's both corporate and governmental of like sucking up all your privacy. And we're not going to be able to convince them that that's not a good idea because it's mercantilist. They want to make as much money and have as much power as possible. So we can't convince them. There's a great Wade Dye quote about this. Like basically that all governments, even the most benign ones, will eventually take the rights and freedoms from their people. So rather than trying to convince them not to, which is kind of a fool's errand, build technology that makes it impossible. This whole thing is such a con that like, in advanced societies, like the government should know everything about us, right? So all these Northern European bankers who want to know everything about their clients, it's like, well, was it really that bad 20 years ago when there was complete financial privacy, meaning that everybody used cash for everything? And when I went and I bought a coffee with a $20 bill from you and you gave me change, I had literally no idea what your name was as the person who sold you the coffee. I didn't know what your last transaction was. I didn't know what your transaction history was. I wasn't able to sell that transaction to a broker who could then target you with advertisements. We lived in a very different world, but I would argue if you look at crime rates, it wasn't a worse world. And I think the goal of like technologists that care about freedom and the goal of like people who want to keep our societies open and free would be to build a payment network system that preserves privacy and that's not connected to our identity, as you mentioned, right? So that's kind of the ethos of, obviously, of Bitcoin, and I think that's why both Bitcoin and like encrypted messaging and communication are such important tools for us as we move forward.